You're listening to the Phatcast, live from the studio with Colin Reynolds.
My rhymes aren't rapping, they're eloquent elaborations of amazing but lazily strung sentence phrasing. Crazy thing is that when achieving my goals, I believe that my role holds unlike society's mold. Growing older, holding a boulder of gold goals on my shoulder. So load up, bringing my cup to cheers, conquering all of my fears. At it for more than years, hugs and tears, jams and raps, cups of beer, clams and crabs. The world is my oyster and it's my choice to voice my boisterous view. And it's coming on cue with a seems that life just takes away my energy sometimes. Then I get more and I use it in music. Play it till we're all dancing on the floor. Big fat dream of mine, but I'll get there somehow, sometime. And we'll all be dancing, we'll all be moving around, having fun while there's music under the sun.
Good afternoon. You're watching the Phatcast with your host, Colin Reynolds, and today I have a special guest, Ivan Megirian.
Megirian. Very close.
Close. Is that a Russian type
It's an Armenian name, actually.
Oh,
Don't know too much else about it.
sure. Now, Armenian are like White Russians, right? I'll just having a joke. I don't know.
Drink.
But you're Tasmanian local.
Yeah, I'm from Cygnet originally, down in Nickersrivulet.
Yeah.
Beautiful area.
It is actually. I used to live not too far from there, down in Jeeveston.
Oh, yeah.
Went to school in Huonville.
Yeah, went there.
Played plenty of footy with the Cygnet boys.
Yeah, I played a bit of footy for them. I wasn't too good.
Me neither, actually. I tended to play back pocket.
Okay.
I had one saleable football skill, and that's tackling. I could tackle people, no worries. Even at my fittest, and I was pretty fit in high school, still a big lad. I just run them down. But when it came to actual, proper football skills, I was very poor. What position did you used to play?
Centre half forward, I think.
That's a prime position.
It is a good position. I think I really wanted that position too. But yeah, every time the ball was there in a rough situation where I had to sort of dive in and grab it, I was a bit scared.
Sure.
I think that's what.
It's dangerous.
Yeah.
Those boots are spiky.
Studs in the bottom.
Spiky plastic studs on the bottom, that's it. And I've seen more than one football injury happen in my time playing. There'll always be some poor kid dragged off court because, or off the field rather, because he's tweaked his neck or someone's rode his back too hard as they're going for the mark or trying to emulate players on TV, of course.
Yeah, my last time playing tennis, I actually dislocated my shoulder, which I thought that was more of a safe sport, but yeah.
And the knees, tennis, that gets you. The constant change of backwards and forwards. Which is not to suggest or let anyone believe that I've played a lot of tennis, because I haven't. But, you can just sort of see how the mechanics of it work. And,
yeah,
screw the knees up for sure. So, now, did that piece that you played, did they have a name?
Well, no, it didn't. When you asked me if I wanted to come and do this performance and interview, a few ideas came to me of what might be nice to play on the piano, and I even thought about writing a song, writing some lyrics, but my real shtick is improvisation, so I just improvised the entire thing.
Yep. So does that reflect the role you have in the band OM3?
Yes.
Yep.
Very improvisational.
Sure.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
Because, at the end of the day, it actually sounds pretty polished. And I forget the name of your front man.
That was Oscar.
Oscar, of course, Oscar.
I nearly forgot myself.
I know a little bit about improvising myself. Well, I have an improvisational act. And true to form, it kind of starts out, you're just sort of finding your feet, finding some sort of groove, having a think about, the kinds of things that you want to say, how you're going to phrase them and that sort of thing. Because freestyle rapping, and that's a tricky game, that is.
Yeah.
But by the end of the set, fully in the flow, got the multis happening. It's an impressive thing to watch.
Thank you.
So now,
well, not that you were talking about me anyway, but
I'm talking about the whole group.
Yeah.
You can't have one without the other. So it's something that I've found. So I recorded my first improvisational album at like 18 months ago. I put that on Spotify, a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
But since I recorded that one, my stage actors, I'm using some different gear now, and I'm interested in playing slightly kind of different things, and I've found it really hard to nail down tracks. And like, there's every expectation I'm going to put another album out, but every time I get there to go and play a song, I think, rightio, let's record this now. I'll play it differently, and which is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with playing a song different every time you play it, especially in terms of performance. But when it comes to actually recording something, I've found it difficult. And I'm wondering if you guys have found the same thing.
Oh, it's really easy to get caught up in trying to perfect something, I think. With me, I really just want to, if I could have it, I thought that the most important piece of advice I could give anyone would be to learn an instrument. And I just think it brings so much joy and happiness to not just you, but everyone you play to and for.
Sure.
And I forgot what your question was, but I was getting to the answer.
Oh, just whether it's hard to record when you start from when your performance is mostly improvisational. No doubt you have people coming up to say, "Oh, you guys are great. Can I buy a CD or have you got an album?"
Yeah.
Have you found it hard to record?
Well, I haven't had many opportunities to record. I recorded this piece 5 years ago and put it on SoundCloud. It was called Psychedelic Soul, which I found out later was actually a genre of music.
Of course it is.
Many artists which I liked listening to as well.
Yep.
But it's not the style I was playing. We did all that in one take and I was quite happy with it.
Yep.
Although, we did mix around, change a few notes on the computer. But I guess it really just depends how happy with it you are and if you want to release it or if you want to perfect it. Everything can be a little bit better. But in the spirit of improvisation, I think play and put it out there if you want and enjoy it is the main thing. But yeah.
Well, one of the things I did because I found it's funny because like even though you're improvising and from that end you've actually got an infinite amount of material you can play at any time. Oh, how long's the gig? 2 hours? 4 hours? No worries.
Yeah.
Let me add it. Right. I found it. Why don't I just record a whole set? I'll just record the whole set, and so one of the songs on the album is like a 40-minute set.
Yep.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It was just the easiest approach. Path of least resistance.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I've kind of taken the same with my musical endeavours so far. When I went to the con for 2.5 years.
Yep.
And started this little band called the Con Artists.
Brilliant.
And we performed around Hobart, mainly a few markets in Dodgers Ferry. And it was so great because we could just rehearse. Our rehearsal was just 2 hours of mucking around, having a jam.
Yep.
And then we'd be like, we'll do that one that was like this and then just play that on the gig. And we managed to just play for hours as long as we needed to every time. And the table, I just bumped it.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. Got a bit of a drum sound on there.
Yeah.
Nice 808 kick. So as you know, recording whole sets is certainly helps get bring some of that music out because it's so hard to release otherwise to release individual tracks because you might have had that one track on that day, but then the next day, different track. So you were speaking about like the joy of learning instruments, and so you played piano here today and a bit of vocals, but you're also learning saxophone.
I'm learning saxophone. I play a bit of guitar. I've played a bit of other instruments, but yeah, saxophone's really exciting. I'm keen to get better at it.
I really love the tone, the timbre of a saxophone. It's when I think of like my favourite kind of sax playing, so the Pulp Fiction soundtrack.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Now, what is it? Is it Jungle Boogie? The sax solo in Jungle Boogie? Where's that?
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what it's called, but when you blow the sax and you get this bubbling, gravelly.
I loved that as a kid.
Oh.
Like my first time hearing trumpet, my grandparents tell me I just jumped up with joy and was like, what's that?
Yeah.
It's that. It's like, oh yeah.
It's a growly sound. Now I don't know if you've seen this. I'd call it a documentary, but it's a single performance made by a stand-up comedy actor. His name is Bill Bailey, and it's called Bill Bailey's Guide to the Orchestra.
Yeah.
So he kind of goes through all the instrument sections, and he goes over a couple of like harmonic cliches as well. Talks about the way that the natural fifth feels, and then the way the augmented fourth feels. You've got this you've got like the hero and then the villain sound in the music, and talks about all these sorts of things. And the saxophone that he uses in one of his tracks is called it's like the Great Tupperware Caper or something like this. Anyway, he gets there, and obviously he's prepared beforehand. But just so he goes through all of these cliches where you've got this whack, 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 for the guitar, got like this 70s cop type theme.
Yeah.
And, whenever the villains come in, he uses that flat fifth or the sharp fourth, however you want to refer to it. I like calling it the flat fifth. I don't know, because I feel like the way that it sounds relates to the fifth more than it relates to the fourth. I mean, the perfect fourth it's an interesting interval, that one, because if the other notes in the chord you're playing or in the harmonic arrangement that you've got are consonant, the fourth sounds dissonant, right? So you could quite commonly hear going from that fourth down to the major third to like resolve the end of a piece of music, for example, quite common. Whereas if the other notes in the harmonic arrangement are discordant or active tones, or, however you want to say, dissonant ultimately, the four sounds like the stability of the chord. So when you've got something like let's just say you're using it like a major seventh, no third, add the fourth. The four in that chord, that sounds like part of your home bass. There are probably a lot of people in the audience thinking, what the hell is he even talking about? And they're right. I've got no idea what I'm talking about. But in music and intervals, I'm fascinated by it.
It's certainly, I get a picture of a piano in my mind, and then I'm visualizing C, and that's the key I often play in.
Yep.
And you play an F above a C, it does sound a bit dissonant. It sounds a bit off, and C major chord, you add an F. But or if you put it below the C, the F below the C, then it's a fifth.
That's right, perfect. And it just sounds stable and
solid power chord.
Yep, absolutely. Which is very unlike Bach. Yeah, apparently one of the cardinal sins. If you want to play, the cliche is playing good classical music. What you're ultimately trying to do is emulate Bach, because he's
the greatest.
The greatest. And what you're not allowed to use is octaves or parallel fifths. Ironically, he did use some of those, but apparently to use those gets away from the character of his playing. He's all about that minor third and the natural seven. And his melodies are obviously, a lot of his compositions are stepwise. And I love stepwise composition where, you take a chord, your next chord, you're only changing one note. The next chord after that, you're only changing one note.
Very little movement between chords.
That's right. And so you'll end up with, many inversions. But changing inversions to keep your notes as constant as possible has a very particular character. This is something Radiohead did a lot in their composition as well, which is one of the reasons they're one of the greatest bands of the 20th century. And 21st as well, of course. But shout out to Radiohead.
Right. And shout out to Brad Meldau for his covers of the pieces. Some of those are insanely, just make me feel so good.
Oh, for sure. And ultimately, you could still call what they're doing from a certain angle pop. It's still a kind of pop. You can call it alternative rock, or you can come up with a lot of different names that sort of apply to them. But they're so uncharacteristically pop in all of their kind of approaches. I mean, modern pop typically, not always, but typically uses 4-chord loop structure, and they're not always 1, 4, 5 minor 6. They can't, often they are. They're not always that. But regardless of which chords they're making the loop out of, you're typically dealing with 4-chord loop stuff. And with perhaps the single exception of Creep, which that's a 4-chord loop. It's not a typical 4-chord loop because you're using the major and the minor secondary dominant.
Okay.
You know, so it's not super typical. A few people have done that in the past, and that in its own has got a very specific sound. Like you could hear the chords to Creep on any instrument, and straight away you would recognise that sound.
Yeah.
Moving from the major to the minor, it's just a great sound. Leonard Cohen did that actually, and once again, he's got some very complex music too. But without getting completely off track, I kind of think of Radiohead as kind of like a modern The Beatles, in the sense that they've sort of gone through these different phases, and their own music tends to be a bit more sophisticated than the music around it.
Yeah, within the genre.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you have a look at, pick any given year and have a look at the Beatles or the Radiohead songs that came out in that year, and then you have another look at all of the other popular songs of that year, their stuff is a bit more sophisticated, which is not to suggest that simple music isn't a part of high culture. I'm not saying one kind of music's better than the other one, but, they definitely plumbed more depths of the intricacies of harmonic arrangements or whatever.
I think it's a really awesome, powerful thing when an individual sets themselves the task of learning an instrument to an insanely masterful degree.
Right.
Like some of my piano teachers, like Matt Bowden, one of them, I should name them all really.
Yeah,
They're all,
Kelly Ottaway.
I've learned a bit from Matt Bowden, Kelly Ottaway, Randall Muir,
Yep.
Tom Vincent, Andrew Legg. And these guys, it like once you've put music as your life and you've really worked that hard, I really can't speak for them, I don't know, but it just seems like it would be so much fun and so easy to make that sort of beautiful music. I guess what I'm trying to say is that a lot of these, say, less sophisticated poppier songs don't have these musicians behind it that have been working their entire lives on their craft.
See, I reckon in a lot of cases that's absolutely true, but I think there are counterexamples.
Yeah.
Where for
the Beatles, they played like nearly 2,000 gigs or 1,500 gigs
Right.
before they made an album.
Right.
So they'd already been loving it, putting their souls into it, and
it would be hard to, like, even if they're doing like 3 or 4 chord jams, it would be hard to imagine they hadn't achieved a certain level of expertise just for the raw amount of experience. And see, look, I forget the name of the dude. I knew it at some point, but there's a guy who's responsible for writing like 180 different, like, #1 hits of different artists, but he's like the writer. So he writes these songs, sells them, and a lot of these songs aren't particularly complex, but they've just got like either a sick groove or a great hook or just a particular chord turnaround somewhere, that just sounds really great. There's something about it anyway that causes everyone to love it and this stuff to achieve popularity. He's got to be some kind of virtuoso, right? Like
is he?
He'd have to be. He would have whatever he's got going on. He's got something going on. Like, you don't accidentally write like 200 #1s, do you?
No, you don't. Yeah, it's the consistency and the
Like, a lot of people will, like super simple. When I'm talking about simple, I'm just talking about the harmonic structure. A lot of people will rip on simple pop music, as in like, oh, music's trash. Especially talking about modern music, they'll say, oh, modern music's trash because of X, Y, Z reasons or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, fine. You write a number one hit.
Yeah.
Why is theirs number one and yours is not? It's like, oh, you know. So it's not just about having something that's simple. You can't just simple and auto tune your way into the charts.
No.
There's something extra happening there.
I wonder about, why it is music sort of emotionally affects us the way it does. And sometimes I think perhaps like these some evolutionary ingrained thought patterns, or say you hear a baby crying, it's something like that sort of pitch as well.
Oh, sure.
You get that similar sort of feeling, and yeah.
There's some sort of science at the highest levels of music composition in terms of not necessarily sophistication, but popular music. There has to be some science behind it. I mean, for example, they're going to use their kick drum sound has a very specific sound. Obviously the 808 is very popular, but it's not just about that particular drum sound. It's also certain amount of reverb on it, certain level of noise gate, certain amount of compression. There are some very specific settings that like work best for radio, or it's about like I'm not there, one of those guys, so I don't know. I'm only guessing, but they might have figured out what kind of settings work best on a variety of different listening systems. And just like you said, with the mental triggers, like the crying baby, or that's got to trigger something psychological inside you, and familiarity. Which is why you're familiar with what we now call the axis progression, the 145 160, because of that Axis of Awesome made that video. Like the four chords of pop,
chords,
like
lots of pop songs.
Yeah. Every song uses these four chords apparently in some configuration or another.
Yeah.
It's familiarity. If you really like a song, and then you hear another song, and let's say, especially if you're not a real music theory enthusiast, and you don't necessarily recognize why. You don't recognise that they're using the same chord sequence or even the same intervals. All you recognise is, oh, I like this sound, right? That's got to sell a lot of songs too.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just have that though. You also need to have, those big lyrical moments at the, in the chorus. You need to have some kind of build up and some sort of climax in the song. There are all sorts of these ingredients, and I mean, I guess this is the path we're on, learning what these ingredients are to really write a great song.
Share them with me.
Yeah. That's it. Well, yeah, like my life goal, write a great song.
Yeah. Yeah, same thing, really. I just never want to stop playing music.
Absolutely the same. Thank you very much for coming on the show today, Ivan.
It's my pleasure.
Excellent, thank you. And we'll be back next week.